All right. Good evening, everyone. I'll try to keep this as short as possible, the fag end of the day. But I think it's a very important session for everybody who's working in the Cryosphere regions as well. So I'm going to take you through three parts of my presentation. One is Stories on Ice, which is basically a trailer of a few films filmed immediately after the first pandemic wave, but before the second one. And this covers Iceland, Greenland, Svalbard, and Arctic Canada. And just to immerse yourself as to how it was during COVID when there were no travelers at all. The second part is a little bit about storytelling, and so when you're out in the field, it might give you some indication as to how educators can use some of your photographs on science communication and the work that you do, because you're also motivating millions of young adults as well. And lastly, I'll take you through some of the initiatives that we had with minifigures such as LEGO on communicating climate change and research. So I'm Ram. I'm part of Polar Educators International, which is a network of educators, researchers, scientists, and indigenous community members. We were formed along with APEX after the last IPY. And but one of the reasons I'm here presenting on this today is also the fact that if you look at the International Polar Year timeline for the next one, which is 2032-33, the next 5 years, if I were to zoom in, has, apart from the Arctic and the Antarctic initiatives, the number of UN initiatives in terms of ecosystem restoration, indigenous languages, sustainable development, cryospheric sciences, all of them overlap, right? And so a lot of projects which are initiated by the UN, UNESCO, education-related, cryosphere-related, will also overlap with some of the Arctic and the Antarctic projects. And so funding will be available across these projects, but you don't know which one at any point in time. But what we try to do is use the opportunity to create the next Polar Resource Book, as we call it, which was an output from the last IPY. More than 300 scientists from about 70 countries contributed to it. But that was a physical book with a CD-ROM. This time around, we are looking at something more inclusive and possibly multilingual as well. And that is one of the reasons why I think all the education initiatives need to be interconnected. 2021, we had a feedback from about 70 scientists across the world as to which activities were outdated and which we could still use. But we'll be circulating another email across all the groups to look at what is the science that you're actually doing and keep it updated once the website or whatever form it goes in is up. So I'm just going to quickly take you through a bit of the Arctic. It's just a 4-minute trailer, so just immerse yourself at the point in time and see if you recognize some of the places if you've been to any of them. life in the Arctic during the pandemic, and hardly any tourists. And as you could see, one of the places where there was possibly minimum consumption of plastic during the pandemic as well. And that's something that I think has a valuable lesson for all of us. The second part is more where I appeal to researchers to shoot a lot more photographs and videos that help educators. So, my period of travel across the last 15 years across the Himalayan regions, the Arctic and the Antarctic has been kind of distributed, but I was in a position to actually document enough to go back and use for curriculum, for schools, for colleges and conferences, for surveys, and as well as use for photographic evidence. And there's some places in South America and Africa I visited as well, which have great impact, but I've not included them here. And so the first thing that I think plays an important part in terms of having an impact is communicating about the scale and size of the cryosphere, right? And always have something in perspective, because without that, you would possibly not understand the scale or size. If I didn't have this person photographing, I wouldn't know how big it was. If I didn't have this photographer here, I wouldn't know how big the mountain was or the waterfall was. That's the Greenland ice sheet, right? And if I didn't have somebody close up, I wouldn't know that this is the lowest part of the ice sheet, and that itself is about 30 meters high, right? So I think that thing in relativity actually tells you the size of the ice and the impact that we have. This is a 16-seater boat, and you can see the wake of the boat. So if I remove the boat, I have no context, right? So you are on ships, you are on, zodiacs, you might be camping as well. But if you get the opportunity to take photographs in context that communicates the scale and size, that will be fantastic, right? It could be researchers, it could be tourists, but all you need is some context. If you have houses or buildings, it's easy to understand the scale. So a snowstorm, how much is snowing and how much snow is possibly going to be forming, it's easy to predict. This is when you're totally stuck in a Norwegian village. But the other thing is glacial calving, right? I had to Photoshop out 6 mosquitoes from this photo. As you would have heard, obviously Greenland has had mosquitoes for a while, but Iceland has got a few now, apparently, and that's been there in the news. But welcome to my world. The other part is also about revisiting places. So the community in Greenland, I was going back after about 10 years. That's a 2-seater bench where I normally have lunch. And it's an iceberg alley, right? So northern Greenland, western Greenland is just insane in terms of the volume of glacial ice that you see form. Again, boats, bubbles, you have methane, you have lots of other gases. So what's under the water is equally important to capture. And if I take you to the Antarctic side, I think the challenge is in terms of actually figuring out how these were formed. So there's actually an iceberg which has been inverted after the melt. So you can see the base and the pillars. 3 penguins and a single penguin on this one. A solo penguin. And obviously here there's a refreeze which has gone about after the berg got inverted. So there's a story to tell there. At the same time, what's going on below, right? So from a height, from the bottom, underwater, again with respect to context, always have somebody in context so that you know how big the impact is. This is about 1 centimeter big, but it has been scaled up and looks humongous. But like I said, even if it is small, obviously air is what is important to us as scientists. But I think there is immense knowledge that is stored within. One of the things that I tell my people is you can never communicate the fragrance of penguin colonies. Probably what is worse than a penguin colony is a walrus colony. But at the same time, you're looking at also talking about mood and emotion when it comes to wildlife, right? So if you see a whale breach, if there is a beautiful video, you might not be a marine biologist, but if you see something that is interesting, beautiful, just take a photograph, right? Like I said, a walrus colony is probably the smelliest place on Earth. But again, we need to tell students that we need to tell students that the Arctic is not just about polar bears. And with the onset of avian flu, and there was one polar bear which died, but possibly it consumed not a walrus but a reindeer. And we need to keep track of every mammal that's possibly being under the purview of infection. One of the heaviest snowfalls in Iceland since 1950s in February, a few years back. The snow cover was about 5 foot high, so the horses could just jump over the fence and come onto the highway. So this is the ring road where the horses are being, put back into the farm. And document human-animal conflict as well, right? So a polar bear following a polar bear sign, but that's why the sign is there. And possibly one of the best sights in summer is a polar bear snoozing, right? There are some hidden stories that you might not notice over a shorter period of time. So the cub of the year has to take a long walk if it has to kind of go to the ice, to jump onto the ice and hunt seals. The mom has been hungry since summer, and if the ice takes longer to freeze, normally it's been October in Canada, but if it's been freezing in November, December, the mom is hungrier for 1.5 more months, right? This was something that I did for Mother's Day. So the cub has never seen a helicopter or heli monitoring before, so it's curious about what the helicopter is doing here. The mom is worried about the male bears that might be there, and because they will kill the cub so that the mom goes into heat and it can mate with the mom, right? And this cub was being brave. He didn't realize that this bear is dangerous, but the mom is a little bit afraid. This is a subadult bear, not a big one, so the mom thinks it is safe to bring the cub outside. And these are all very fleeting moments, right? And normally researchers on the field are there long enough to capture some scenes, if you're researching that. I wanted to compare it to, say, Uganda and the Congo, where bit of the Congo where 500 water spots had died up, right? So the animals which are going to be affected are going to be the gorillas. And the Virunga National Park, as it is, you're not just COVID, there's Ebola, there is the refugees and the protests and the war going on. But as a primate, one of the behaviors with gorillas and other sentient beings like, say, the elephants is, this is a stillborn baby gorilla or a dead fetus. So it just broods with it for a little time over a week and then throws it away, right? So it's a 1-day-old gorilla, 2 days old. Here it's protecting it from the rains, and this is just an infant which is being naughty. So in terms of the behavior of mothers, whether it's bears or walruses or primates, is something to document out there. And for older age groups, I think like I told about the dead fetus, sometimes the vocabulary and the situations are more mature, which school kids might need some parental guidance on. And likewise, in the Andean regions, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, and as well as Argentina. Can anyone tell me where this photo is from? Take a guess. I know you have a polar quiz tomorrow, but so this is one example of, normally people give examples of indigenous knowledge from the Arctic regions. So this is one which I used. This was when we were coming back from Antarctica in 2023. There was a Colombian plane crash, and 4 kids survived for over a month. The eldest was 13-year-old who knew knowledge or had been taught by his mom about how to survive in the jungle. And due to climate change, they said that the flowers, the forest was in actual bloom. So there were flowers, there were fruits that they could consume, which was safe. And the 13-year-old knew as to which was poisonous and which was not, right? And because of the 14-year-old, you had the 11-year-old surviving, the 4-year-old surviving, and the 1-year-old surviving. And they survived for over a month in the jungle until the dogs found them, the rescue dogs. Had the kid not known from his mother about, you know, how to survive in the jungle, those 4 wouldn't have made it, right? This one is again, any guesses where it's from? So this is a fetus of a northern white rhino. So the last northern white rhino, male rhino, Sudan, died a few years back. So they were trying an IVF with the, you know, the female rhinos. And one morning, the female died. They didn't know why. But the actual reason was in the Maasai territory, the Maasai people used to bury their dead. So when it rained heavy on one of the nights, some of the bacteria which were feasting on 500-year-old, it was actually about 400 to 500-year-old bacteria, it came up to the surface and wiped up the rhino overnight. But the IVF was successful because they rescued, they took out the fetus, but it was stillborn by then. So had you not known the fact that Maasai bury their dead, then there's a possibility of bacteria, right? We could have, if you had known it, we would have probably rescued, the mom as well. So it's important as scientists, whether it's permafrost research, I don't know how much anthrax is stored up in Arctic Russia or in other places. But at some point in time, you're going to face certain hazards because of that. And it's important to work collectively with indigenous groups to know what is going on in those regions. And the next part is actually choosing the story. So when you're out in the field or doing research, choose a pet project, whether it's submersibles or anything else. And how do you best tell the story with respect to that? This is about 8 or 9 polar bears, what we call golf balls, waiting for the bay to freeze. And so you could tell a story with a lot of animals. You could tell a story with just 2 animals. You could have a good photographs which communicates the anthropomorphic nature, which is not necessarily good for scientists, but for students it's a good idea. And also some information like what is the color of a polar bear. Very few kids know that it is dark or black in color. But unless they see closer to the skin at points in time, they think it is white, right? And a lot of scientists think polar bears are white as well, until you actually go and do research and know that the skin is actually dark in color. Similarly, walrus pups, they don't have teeth, so they can't haul on to the ice. It's the mothers who have to be with them to ensure that they're on the ice all the time. And with the ice melting, then it's very difficult for young walruses to survive. Do we show 100,000 penguins? Do we show 500 penguins? Do we show 2 penguins? You can show some penguin chicks in the midst, but the fact that there is a diversity within the homogeneity, I think, is important for us to understand. And sometimes it can just be a single penguin which tells a story, right? This was Christmas in Antarctica. We were camping at Windless Bight near Mount Erebus. Santa Claus from Scott Base had come to visit us. But the best gift they brought was the haggling on what they were going to take back, because this is the toilet tent. And when we say leave no trace, we carry all our pee and poop back, right? So the pee goes to Scott Base, gets recycled. The poop goes back to Christchurch in a ship, right? And if you're volunteering duty for your toilet tents, then pray to God, right? This is all the poop which comes back in buckets. This is the pee which comes in cans. We actually weigh them to exactly know how much pee and poop was collected, right? Obviously, there are movies being released, so some of the topics become quite popular. But like I said, it was about communication, about emotions, and sometimes that works. And that story is a lot more powerful to use than just scientific facts, right? At least with a younger audience. This is a slightly more complex story because this is in Greenland. And recently, one of these dogs which grew up killed a child. And Greenlandic dogs are not huskies. They are separate species. And they are work animals, right? So they're kept outside the village once they grow older. And more often than not, they are culled once they're not able to be managed, right? A lot of girls like birds. So I also make sure that when I'm creating content and putting it in various media, you also have an understanding of the young audience, what are the species they like and what is it that they don't like. So sometimes you need to cater to the vast audience across countries and include the birds which are there as well, because there's a huge bird following amongst young girls. The other thing which we try to also talk about is how a sealskin clothing is still the best option when you're operating minus 50 degrees and below, right? And sometimes you're restricted to modes of transport like dog sledding and harsh weather. And unlike 30 years back, you have rainfall in the north, you have rainfall in the south, right? It's no longer a dry place. So it's not just snow, but it's also rain as well. So you want things to dry really quickly. So I think that's a good option. And last but not the least, some species that are not often found together, right? So this is in the Falkland Islands, probably one of those few places. I'm sure there are some parts of Galapagos, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, where you have some species of penguin with other species. But this is something that people in the tropical regions are not used to seeing in any of the books. And lastly, in terms of mood, also, if there's a possibility of capturing different colors and hues, it's a good idea, because the Arctic is not just about white and blue, but it's a lot of other colors as well. And if we can get into the water, catch some of these species, and even science communication. So this was Elephant Island, and there was one single penguin in the distance which was covered in blood. Was it from escaping an elephant seal, an orca, or it just fell off the cliff? I do not know. But there is a story to tell there. But if I don't zoom in, I don't see that penguin. I don't get that story, right? I never seen a pod of 150 plus fin whales. So this is about half my camera shot, which has about 40 whale blows. So general logic is you double the number of whale blows, that's the actual number of whales. So there were about 40, so I think there would be 80 fin whales here, and on this side there were another 40 whale blows and possibly another 80 fin whales there. So, and like I said, the criticality of it, we did interview some of the people out there. 2023, when I was there, was the first time they'd enforced the rule that you cannot sit in South Georgia or near any penguin colony. You have to stand, you can crouch. I don't know how much it helps, but those are the ongoing rules, and rules get changed for tourists as much as possible. As a researcher, there are certain liberties we take, and you might have taken some liberties as well when you're doing research, but I think it's good to be aware of what's going on. The third pole is, as we call it, the Hindu Kush, Karakoram and Himalayan regions. The valleys in the Himalayas are drying up. Tibet is a fantastic place to be at, but you can see climate change happening real time. Likewise, animals, they have behavior up on top. So the snow leopards typically eat blue sheep, and in winter there's no grass on the top, the blue sheep come down and the snow leopards follow their prey. So sometimes they come into villages, and overnight they can kill 30 sheep, and the farmers have lost their stock overnight, right? So that's livestock is their wealth. And indigenous communities in the Arctic are well documented. In the Himalayas, not so much, right? And I come from a country where we have two of the oldest documented languages, which is Sanskrit and Tamil. And a lot of the Sanskrit here is old Sanskrit. And we also had an interpolar conference in Nepal a couple of months back, and there we connected the Sami folks with the yak herders in the Himalayas. And a lot of common things with people there, the way they carry their children, kids at the back so that the body warmth is transferred, hands are free. The dogs there. Nepal also celebrated its Yak Day, first Yak Day this year on April 20th. The importance of livestock for them. And when I take it to kids, the best thing I've noticed is LEGO is the best tool, specifically minifigures. And in any scientific community, there is a glaciologist, there's a marine biologist, there's me as an educator. And this pit is about 6 feet deep because we are protecting ourselves from any katabatic winds in Antarctica, right? But how do you communicate these researcher stories, and what do they actually do? And we asked educators, do you actually cover polar regions? Only 50% said yes, right? So that's why people working in the cryosphere region need to realize that they've been fortunate to understand these topics up close really well. Half the population in the world doesn't actually read about it, right? But the more important thing is all the educators want good videos, online visual activities which are hands-on, simplified versions of research that people actually do. And that was something that we wanted to take into practice. So we shot a lot of LEGO videos on Antarctica, Scott Base, McMurdo. I took a polar bear to Antarctica, so there's the adventures of Bjorn. And I could have made Bjorn famous, so because when the report came out on you know, the hottest week in 2023, and they were asking me for a quote as I was coming back from Antarctica, and I gave my name, but Bjorn was there with me visiting Shackleton. So in all my social media, I put Bjorn's name instead of mine, so Bjorn becomes a little more famous. I also shot with Tintin because Tintin comics are very popular in Europe and India. So that was Machu Picchu, this was Brazil. That's The Migrant Girl in Venice by Banksy. So that's a good tool to talk about the migrant crisis. Uh, that's in Iceland, Explorers on the Moon. That's me, but it's just an ice cave. But it's just to give a context of, you can use a minifigure, you can use yourself, but it gives a good perspective of what's actually going on. I couldn't get the endurance here. It went to the Arctic Circle Assembly, it went to Portugal last week, but I had to leave it in London because it's difficult to carry. But I could connect it with history because history and human geography is equally important as far as humanities go. And like I said, if you have any tool or any context, so this is a 30-second video which I shot in Antarctica, which talks about setting up a weather station. Very simple, right? Just explains the different parts. What's a tripod? And the reason I use callouts is it can later be translated into other languages rather than doing a complex narrative. Similarly, if you wanted to do a seal survey, right? Just 20 seconds or 30 seconds of stop motion telling what you're actually doing out there. And then you can go into the science of it. So this is a simplified version of it. You have a seal count, left side, right side, tag numbers, other notes, right? And depending on the audience, you can have a complex science to it, or you can keep it simplified. But everybody loves Lego. So the introduction can stay the same. The conceptual part can change depending on the audience that you're addressing. And then we made a lot of activity sheets, integrating knowledge and values, have role plays, give stickers and write down a narrative. Career and awareness is important. So every year, the US Antarctic program, obviously UK, definitely New Zealand and Australia, advertise for plumbers, mechanics, electricians, communication experts, right? And it's not just the scientists who are in demand, but common careers, because all the gateway cities, whether it's Christchurch or Hobart or Cape Town or Ushuaia, Punta Arenas, if you want to add more gateway cities, yes, a lot of careers and importance given, right? And so we are trying to build that as well in our whole exercise to make sure that people from college level to university level know what are the career options available through the examples and research that can go on in the activity. Because in a science activity group, typically what happens is you talk about the science but not about the support stuff, right? So if you're doing an Antarctic traverse and crossing, 40, 50 kilometers on the ice, you can't do it without your drivers, you can't do it without your electricians and so on. So communicating about that becomes extremely important. So that's where we ended with, and I think the work is on. I'll just like to end here and say that I think there's a lot of things that we can do, but when you're on the field, try to also wear the hat of an educator and see what would help youngsters, the younger version of you in college as well, and motivate them to do something really, really big. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah, I have two actually. I don't know if they can be answered together. One is how other science and like lead science, the chiefs of labs and of universities, how they perceive this part of the work when you do in the field, how they if they support it and how important for them is it, how they like how they perceive it. And the other one is about science denial. So if you have seen a change on how people of the public and kids and teenagers, they receive the science communication because of the growth of science deniers and the science attack like global wide.
So I think the first part is important, right? Like I'll come to that a little later. For example, today you're celebrating Polar Pride Day, right? It's very important to be inclusive, right? So somebody who's a strong climate denier might be an animal lover, right? So you might be triggering some emotion somewhere, even with people who might generally not be, looking at science in that manner. So we as educators, because we cater to millions of kids. So during COVID, I was handling about 3,000 schools and about 1.5 million children, right? And how do you make them learn about something like climate change or even about COVID? So there's, and not everybody has the same understanding. So you try and capture everything possible, but depending on the country that you're working with or the university that you're working with, I'm sure there might be a lot of climate deniers out there as well. But you'll have to converse with them in various forms. So in scientific reports, you will never see such photographs, right? But as part of university books, there is a possibility to include that. Because there might be people who are not possibly interested in one representational photo, but actually the story behind it, right? And the other thing that is important is making it interdisciplinary, right? And there is a lot of effort even from the university side to make it possible. Even with, say, an organization like SCAR, they started recognizing humanities and social sciences, so you have a Haas conference now. So I think it's important to understand that the human geography, humanities and social sciences of it, the historical aspect of it, that there is a lot of science to it. And in the Arctic, the second thing that is happening is there's a huge movement for decolonizing education, including indigenous knowledge, right? And there are people who have worked with traditional non-renewable sources of energy, oil, coal, and so on. And there are people who will possibly have to rely on natural resources for sustenance. But that doesn't mean that, you have to convince them that, hey, don't go hunt a seal, right? So that's how they've lived. So you'll have to be careful in terms of approaching topics which are nuanced, but cover as much as possible in the diversity, and then slowly communicate with them in various forms. One of them will appeal, right? And that's why we want to do it from a school level onwards, because lives are at stake, right? The first question about universities and was it how do they perceive it was the question.
Like if they help with it, or for them is like I don't know how easy is to work with like the science they are there to collect samples, if they are open to share their science for science communication, or if you found some barriers with them.
I think there are barriers purely from the fact that they don't have time, right? That is the biggest problem. But I think the challenge is if you don't do it, they'll not take the initiative necessarily to do it, right? So as if you're an educator first, you have to try to take the onus. The government can, but I think in the long run, at least currently I can speak for the Arctic that today if you want to do research in the Arctic, I think they will need the permission of the village elder, get an okay to do research in the village or the community, share the data and come back, right? That wasn't the case 15, 20 years back either, right? So I think it's important for researchers to realize that. And once they look at all the human angles to their research, who's getting affected, who's not, and the way to do research, I think they'll be willing to share as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a good night. Thank you.